Hi guys! Welcome back to Memory Sleep, where we drift through history to find the secrets of truly restorative rest. Tonight, we're traveling to Viking longhouses to learn how our Norse ancestors mastered the art of deep, two-phase sleep using total darkness, crackling hearth light, herbal brews, and communal warmth. If you love unwinding with stories from the past, make sure to hit subscribe, smash that like button, and ring the bell so you never miss a night's journey. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us what time it is right now in your country. Let's see our shared bedtime map. Picture yourself standing at the low threshold of a Viking longhouse, its sod-covered roof blending into the rolling Icelandic hills beyond. You step inside, and the heavy wooden door thuds shut, sealing out the biting wind. The first thing you notice is the darkness, thicker, softer, and more complete than any blackout curtains you've ever tried. Only a narrow ribbon of amber light pools up from the hearth trench that runs the length of the room. It flickers over rough-hewn beams, smoked rafters, and the silhouettes of sleeping forms curled beneath pelts along the walls. In this hush, you begin to sense what Viking rest truly felt like: two distinct chapters of sleep, woven naturally into the night. A rhythm as ancient as the stars overhead, and one modern science is only now starting to rediscover. During the first chapter, often called first sleep, you lie on a raised wooden platform padded with rye straw and covered by thick wool blankets. The fire's embers glow dull red, giving off just enough heat to keep the chill away, but not enough light to fool your brain. Without the pulse of LEDs, phone screens, or street lamps, your eyes adapt to near total darkness. Melatonin surges, and you slide into slow-wave sleep faster than you do in your own bedroom. Around you, everyone drifts off together: family, warriors, traders, even livestock huddled at the far end of the hall, creating a shared sense of security that lets your muscles and mind fully release. No sirens, no buzz of traffic, no Bluetooth alerts. The only sounds are the pop of charcoal and the low breath of the North Atlantic wind outside the walls. Roughly 4 hours later, your body eases out of heavier stages of sleep into a gentle wakefulness. There's no alarm clock yanking you from a dream, just the subtle shift in hormones that comes when prolactin peaks during the middle of the night. You blink into the dimness and feel surprisingly calm, almost meditative. Around the hall, a few other early risers softly rise too. One tosses another log onto the coals, another checks on a restless infant, and 2 older women sit near the fire plaiting reed baskets, their fingers working by feel more than sight. Instead of grabbing a phone, you might whisper a quiet prayer to Freya, stir a clay cup of valerian root brew, or trade stories with a cousin returning from a coastal voyage. This interlude, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, feels like bonus time, neither fully day nor night, when thoughts flow and tension evaporates. Far from being a disruption, this gap is the hinge that makes the entire Viking night restorative. Modern chronobiologists now suggest that the brain processes memories, regulates stress hormones, and repairs tissues most efficiently when we follow the ebb and flow of a bifurcated night. In the glow of the firelight, you feel it firsthand. Ideas come unhurried, worries feel distant. No one clutches at the notion that being awake means you are failing at sleep. Instead, you sense a cultural permission to drift, to watch sparks dance up the smoke hole, to listen to the hush of snow brushing the roof. Ironically, this communal pause accomplishes what so many expensive mindfulness apps promise today: a protected pocket of mental stillness. When drowsiness returns, you slip back to your bedding for second sleep. Now the hall is warmer and the darkness deeper as the fire shrinks again. You press your shoulders into the firm straw mattress and feel your spine realign. Your pulse slows, your breathing lengthens, and you plummet into REM cycles rich with dream color. Because your stomach is light, you ate your final meal hours before sundown. Digestion doesn't jolt you awake. Because you're wrapped in wool and reindeer hide, your core temperature drops gradually, signaling your brain to extend the deepest phases of sleep. You may dream you're steering a dragon-proud ship through midnight seas or walking a misty fjord path lit by the aurora borealis. Either way, those dreams arrive unbroken, knit together by a cascade of hormones exactly when evolution meant them to. By dawn, pale blue light seeps through the smoke hole. The longhouse stirs. People tie up cloaks, lift shields from hooks, coax goats out into the yard. You open your eyes feeling rested in a way your modern mattress rarely delivers. No groggy haze, no caffeine emergency. Because the night was written in two distinct acts, both symphonies finished on perfect cadence. You stand up ready to row, sow barley, carve runes, or simply greet the day's chill with a calm grin. That vitality is what chroniclers later marveled at when describing Viking endurance on sea voyages and long raids the Norse carried within them, a sleep protocol tuned to Earth's original lighting schedule. Flash forward to your own bedroom. Blue light leaks around blinds. The hum of a charger glows by the bed, and the temptation to scroll until 1 a.m. is relentless. Yet knowing how the Vikings slept gives you a roadmap. You can dim bulbs to firelight levels, banish screens an hour before bed, split your night with a quiet, intentional midpoint if insomnia strikes, and refuse to catastrophize a midnight wake-up. You can even brew a mild valerian or hops tea in place of a sleep aid pill, echoing those herbalists at the hearth. Most of all, you can replace the anxious mantra, "I must sleep 8 hours straight," or else with a softer guideline, "I'll let my body ebb and flow naturally," just like my Viking ancestors. Standing on the threshold again, you feel the difference between chasing sleep and welcoming it. Out in the dark, you hear distant surf crashing against basalt cliffs, steady and timeless. Inside, the longhouse offers proof that when humans embrace natural darkness, communal safety, and a flexible view of the night, rest comes easier and with more depth. As you step back into your modern life, that lesson travels with you. Sleep need not be a single unbroken sprint, but a pair of gentle tides. Ride them well, and you may find the same quiet strength that once powered oars across the icy North Sea. So tonight, after the video fades and you set your device aside, consider carving out your own first and second sleeps. Let your room be darker, cooler, and quieter than usual. If you wake in the wee hours, don't panic. Brew a calming herbal drink, jot a dream fragment, stretch, or breathe by candlelight, then slip back under the covers. When dawn arrives, you'll carry forward a tradition older than sagas, as practical as a hand-forged axe, and as restorative as the hush inside a Viking longhouse. Welcome to the rhythm of ancient rest. May it carry you into dreams as vast as the northern sky. The fire has fallen to a lazy glow when your eyes ease open again, the hush inside the longhouse thick as wool. At first you think dawn is near, but the air feels too deep, too velvety to belong to morning. This is the calm hinge between sleeps, the breathing space woven into every Viking night. You lift the edge of your wool blanket and swing your feet onto the packed earth floor, careful not to jostle the little dog curled behind your knees. Sparks wobble up from the hearth trench, painting faint stars on the smoke-black beams overhead. That gentle shimmer invites you into movement without urgency, because everyone around you accepts this interval as perfectly natural. No one scolds you for being awake. No inner voice counts lost minutes. Instead, the culture hands you a simple permission: use this quiet slice of darkness for whatever the soul or settlement needs most. Your first task is practical: feed the fire. You draw a birch log from the stack, lean it against the ember bed, and watch as a thin flame curls along the bark. The warmth spreads at once, but the light stays soft, More sunset than spotlight. That matters. Soft light guards your melatonin, keeping your body on its ancient timetable, while the dance of orange on timber soothes the brain like a slow drumbeat. As the flames settle into a steady hush, you notice the room's subtle choreography. Across the aisle, a young father yanks on fur boots, whispering that he'll take perimeter watch so an older cousin can rest. Near the entryway, two sisters unfurl a half-woven fishing net, their fingers moving by instinct through rows of flax fibers. Beside them, an elderly woman hums as she knots colored yarn into a new pattern for her granddaughter's cloak. Each small chore clicks into place like a wooden peg. Simple, necessary, rhythmic. You feel the curious alertness that modern science calls a prolactin plateau, a hormonal tide that rises after initial deep sleep. It leaves you wakeful yet wrapped in contentment, as if someone draped a featherweight quilt over your thoughts. Under this mellow spell, chores glide rather than drag. You sharpen a hand axe, pausing between strokes to sip a mug of honeyed hops, tea passed down the bench. Its earthy bitterness grounds you, while faint notes of wildflower linger on your tongue. The blade finds an edge, and your breathing slows in time with the scrape of iron against whetstone. You begin to understand why sagas say a craftsman's best work emerges under moonless skies without bustle or chatter. Your hands and mind fuse in purposeful flow. Conversation threads the hush, too. A sailor just home from Ireland whispers tales of mist-soaked monasteries. You reply with news of how the barley fared during last week's frost. Words drift lazily, each voice respectful of sleepers. Yet the exchange feels intimate in a way daylight rarely matches. You can admit worries about an injured shoulder, seek advice on carving a new keel post, or share a half-remembered dream in which a red fox led you through silver birches. The group listens without interruption, because midnight talk carries a sacred flavor. Here, among embers and low rafters, secrets stay safe, and counsel lands softly. Modern therapists might call it communal processing. Vikings simply called it life between first and second breaths. Occasionally, the interval hosts ritual. Tonight, the healer chooses a moment when most early risers are gathered. She kneels by the hearth and sprinkles dried mugwort onto a shard of burning coal. Aromatic smoke twirls upward, earthy and sharp, cleansing sins and illnesses alike in Norse belief. You bow your head as she murmurs over a carved antler talisman meant to guard a newborn from fever. The ceremony lasts only minutes, yet the room shifts. Embers seem brighter, the night warmer, everyone's shoulders just a little lower. Ritual here is not a separate compartment, but braided into daily survival. Feed the fire, mend the net, mend the spirit. Eventually, a gentle fatigue returns. You place the axe back on its peg, stretch tight shoulders toward smoked rafters, and let a long breath spill out. Around you, others shudder their tasks, nets coiled, sentry relieved, mugwort smoke fading into the thatch. No one checks a clock or forces the timeline. Everyone simply heeds the subtle pull downward. You slip back onto your straw-stuffed bedding, tug the reindeer hide over your chest, and feel the heat radiating from fresh logs. Your core temperature begins its slow, steady drop, the cue your body needs to slide into REM-rich dreaming. Prolactin ebbs while growth hormone rises, ready to patch muscle fibers worn by oar and plow. The transition feels like stepping from a warm bath into cool linen sheets, so gentle you scarcely notice when consciousness unclenches. As sleep folds around you again, faint echoes linger, the crisp ring of whetstone, the hiss of sap in firewood, the healer's chant. They weave into dream images. Perhaps you glide down a misty river, axe gleaming like a moon sliver, or trace sparkling fish scales through a summer net. Whatever form your dreams take, they carry the imprint of midnight purpose and shared watchfulness. Anchoring you deeper than any white noise app could, modern researchers marvel at how split sleep supports memory consolidation and emotional regulation. You feel those benefits settling into bone and sinew. No journal article needed. When gray pre-dawn pushes at the smoke hole, you wake for good. But something from the interval travels with you, a centered calm. A sense that life's tasks and life's rest need not battle for territory. In your modern house, the clock may still dictate when you rise. Yet you remember the earlier hush and know you can recreate pieces of it. Keep a dim amber bulb instead of a ceiling glare. Stash a craft project near the couch for any sleepless hour. Brew chamomile rather than open social media. And if you must stand guard over digital deadlines or crying infants, you can do so without panic, trusting that the second tide of sleep will carry you back. Stepping outside, you breathe in cold morning air, sharper now that you're fully awake. Frost crunches underfoot, and crows scatter from the barn roof. Your axe blade, honed under starless calm, glints at your belt. The net woven in silence drapes over a beam. Ready for the next catch, the newborn sleeps peacefully, protected by smoke and prayer. None of those moments would exist without the interval you once feared as insomnia. Instead, they prove that a night can hold many moods, vigilant and drowsy, purposeful and dreamy, all stitched together into one long weave of human resilience. You shoulder a bucket, heading for the well, and the rising sun smears pink across drifting clouds. As light fills the yard, you grin, remembering that the best part of the coming day, your steady energy, your clear focus was forged during a stretch of darkness most people try to banish. You no longer view wakefulness at midnight as a thief of rest, but as its silent partner. That perspective alone changes how you meet each dawn unhurried, rooted, and quietly sure that good sleep is less about chasing hours and more about trusting the night's natural cadence. So when evening falls again and the hearth dims, you won't dread the moment your eyes flutter open halfway through. You'll rise, tend the fire, mend what needs mending, and savor the peace that settlers once believed was a gift from the gods, a gift waiting still in the space between sleeps. You spend the afternoon mending fence rails while gulls wheel over the fjord, yet part of your mind is already rehearsing nightfall. As shadows lengthen, you glance back at the longhouse and notice how its sod-covered roof seems to vanish into the hill behind it, an intentional camouflage that also serves a subtler purpose. Thick turf and densely chinked pine planks block the last rays of twilight long before the sun fully dips, turning the interior into a womb of darkness the moment the heavy door swings shut. You duck inside just as the first stars appear. The wooden latch drops with a muffled clunk, and everything beyond arm's reach dissolves. No glass panes to leak moonlight. No lattice of street lamps shimmering through drapes. Just one narrow smoke hole overhead, and a row of fist-sized knotholes plugged with straw. You feel the absence like a soft pressure on your eyes. In seconds, your pupils widen. Parasites of light hunting for photons that simply aren't there. The effect is soothing rather than disorienting, because the space remembers how humans once welcomed night as a companion, not a hazard. A single hearth trench bisects the floor. Low walls of riverstone cradle a slow-burning heap of beach embers, no taller than a curled hand. You place a split log lengthwise on the coals, letting its bark smolder instead of blaze, and the glow swells to the amber of banked coals inside a wood stove. It throws just enough warmth to keep frost from creeping under doors, yet still ranks lower in lumens than the softest Edison bulb. Orange reflections lick the rafters, but the majority of the hall remains ink black, and that is precisely the point. The Vikings understood without naming hormones that true night sets a biochemical stage. In total darkness, your pineal gland pulses melatonin like a midnight tide, opening the floodgates to deep, restorative slow-wave sleep. You settle onto the raised bedding platform along the left wall, one of 2 wooden benches running the hall's length. A pony snorts faintly from the stall at the far gable. But otherwise, the hush is absolute. No refrigeration hum. No HVAC whoosh. No phantom glow from charging cables. The rhythmic pop of resin in the log becomes your metronome. Around you, silhouettes ease beneath pelts. A grandmother, 2 cousins, a traveling skald who offered stories in exchange for shelter. The communal layout means nobody wastes body heat. Their breath mingles with yours, lifting the air temperature just enough to keep muscles loose while skin still senses crisp coolness. A combination modern sleep scientists call thermoneutral. As you recline, soft fur brushes your cheeks while straw shifts under the wool sack that serves as a pillow. The firmness surprises you at first. There's no spring to absorb tension. Yet the even plane aligns vertebrae like a gentle hands-on adjustment. You release a sigh, shoulders sliding open. And in that motion, you realize how often modern beds cradle the body at the expense of the spine. Here, with the simplest materials, wood, straw, fleece, the Vikings stumbled upon orthopedic support thousands of years before memory foam. Minutes pass, or perhaps longer. Time loses edges in the dark. You sense your heartbeat slowing, less a drum than a distant oar striking water. The fire's glow paints barely perceptible eddies on the underside of smoke-blackened beams, and each pulse of light tells your brain, yes, night is real. Surrender. Under such conditions, REM and non-REM cycles follow their primal script, alternating perfectly without the jittery interruptions that blue light and urban rumble impose. Later, researchers will discover that even a 5-lux light aglow weaker than most nightlights can delay melatonin release. Tonight you lie in a chamber barely touching 0.5 lux, the scientific equivalent of cave darkness. Outside, the aurora might be dancing, but thick walls and turf roof keep even that cosmic show at bay. Insulation matters. Pine planks dovetailed tight, seams stuffed with moss, exterior mounded in a foot of sod. The structure absorbs sound as well as light, so when winter gusts rake the hillside, you hear only the faintest moan a lullaby, not a siren. Contrast that with modern apartments where sirens, subwoofers, and neon seep through drywall like restless ghosts. The Vikings engineered silence without foam panels or double glazing. They simply built stoutly and let Earth itself muffle the night. You might assume trapped smoke would choke sleepers, but clever venting solves the problem. Warm air rises up the central flue, drawing in fresh oxygen through gaps at floor level. The result is a slow, invisible convection that sweeps away pollutants while leaving heat low enough to hug sleepers' bodies. Ventilation without drafts. Another trick contemporary architects still chase: inhaling that faint mix of wood smoke and sea salt air. Your lungs feel cleared, not coated. The smell becomes part of your dreamscape, a scented cue telling the brain it's safe to descend into deeper stages. Later, when the hormonal midpoint nudges you awake, the same darkness guards your transition. You open your eyes to nothingness so pure it feels like velvet pressed against lids. Without luminous digits screaming 2:17 a.m., you guess time only by how far the log has collapsed into ash. You add another, its crackle loud as a pebble dropped in a well. In that minimal red glow, you repeat the watchful chores described earlier, sharpening a blade, sharing murmured stories, then return to bed, because the environment never flipped to full brightness. Your circadian clock hardly notices the excursion. Melatonin drizzles on, prolactin peaks, and second sleep swallows you whole. When dawn finally scrapes a thin blade of gray across the smoke hole, the difference is immediate light arrives all at once, not in a slow leak through curtains hours earlier. The contrast jolts cortisol awake on schedule, delivering a clear now signal your endocrine system trusts. You stand, stretch, and feel a rested lightness seldom matched after a night spent under LEDs and standby lights. The longhouse itself becomes a physiological switch, dimming your internal systems at dusk and flipping them back at sunrise like pulling a wooden hatch. Translate the lesson to your own bedroom and you begin with darkness. Not a dim lamp, not a redshift screen filter, but something closer to the ink you just slept in. Blackout curtains that seal to the frame, a towel rolled against the door gap, opaque tape over appliance LEDs. Next, control for sound, thick rugs or acoustic panels. Sure, but also the decision to choose quieter neighborhoods or to lobby for better city ordinances because Viking silence wasn't purchased, it was prioritized. Then consider flame analogs, amber Edison bulbs, salt rock lamps, or battery candles flickering at under 5 lumens. The technology exists. What's missing is the cultural permission to embrace darkness instead of fearing it. Modern research backs every instinct your ancestors baked into their architecture. Studies show complete darkness boosts nocturnal growth hormone, accelerates muscle repair, stabilizes insulin sensitivity, and even improves memory consolidation. Hospitals now trial quiet at night protocols to mimic some of these effects. Dimming hallways and banning overhead pages after 10 p.m. Elite athletes sleep in light-sealed pods. All that science merely reaffirms what a sod roof and a banked fire achieved with no instrumentation at all. You step outside and let the sunrise splash gold across the fjord. Behind you, the longhouse door creaks shut again, guarding its precious night inside. You know you'll return come dusk, and when you do, darkness will welcome you like a silent friend. The lesson is simple. Protect the night, and the night will protect you. In the 21st century, that means reclaiming control over every diode, lamppost, and pop-up notification vying to steal your hormones. It means teaching children that bravery sometimes looks like turning lights off, not on. And it means recognizing that the best sleep environment was perfected long before electricity designed by necessity, sustained by tradition, and validated now by laboratories from Stanford to Stockholm. As you shoulder your spear for the day's hunt, you pause, looking back once more at the hill-blended roof. That mound of earth is more than shelter. It's a promise that darkness, used wisely, breeds strength by dawn. Carry that promise into your modern bedroom tonight, and you'll feel the quiet thrum of something older than history, the body aligning with a world that still spins, still sets, and still offers deepest rest to those who honor the dark. A muted blush clings to the rafters when you settle near the hearth. And in that subdued glow, you discover the Vikings' quiet genius with light. They didn't banish darkness, they curated it, tinting the night with just enough amber to navigate, but never enough to jolt the brain awake. The biggest difference between their hour of fire and your lamplit living room isn't brightness, but color. Flames, whale oil lamps, and tallow candles drape the hall in wavelengths hovering around 1,800 Kelvin, far warmer than even the coziest Edison bulb. Your eyes read that tone as sunset, not noon. So your pineal gland keeps releasing melatonin like a slow river instead of slamming the gate at the first hint of blue. Watch how the elders bank the fire before bed. They push thick beech logs against a spine of glowing coals, then lay a pine split crosswise on top. Resin seeps out, catching in delicate whirls that flare for seconds before settling into a rich, steady smolder. That tiny flare is the brightest burst you'll see all night, maybe 15 lumens, equal to a single birthday candle. In its wake, the longhouse returns to low, dappled orange and deep-pocketed shadow. Eyes adjust within moments. Bodies relax almost instantly. It's the visual equivalent of a bass note in a lullaby, felt more than seen. When additional light is needed, someone fishes a length of twisted moss from a clay jar of seal oil, lights the tip, and wedges the wick into a shallow soapstone bowl. The flame hovers no higher than a thumb joint and burns with a lazy red heart. No harsh pop, no buzzing ballast, no strobing at invisible frequencies that trick your retinas into constant micro-adjustments. Instead, the room receives a calm pulse that leaves outlines intact but lets corners dissolve. You feel your shoulders sink the way they do beside a campfire, because that's exactly what it is, only miniaturized for indoor living. Every sensory cue in the hall confirms it's night and you're safe. The warmth licking your shins, the faint scent of resin and char, the rhythmic sigh of charcoal collapsing each detail reinforces what chronobiologists call environmental congruence. Your biology expects darkness after dusk. The Vikings deliver it, punctuated by an ember glow that announces neither dawn nor danger. Compare that to modern interiors where cool white LEDs spray 500 Kelvin across drywall until the instant you flick them off. Your brain, still roaring with daytime signals, needs an hour to catch up. No wonder you scroll in bed, chasing drowsiness the way a hunter stalks a wary stag. Notice how the Vikings' light philosophy shapes evening rituals. Children gather around the hearth to hear sagas as orange reflections dance in their widening eyes. A shieldsmith inspects a new iron boss, rotating it to catch the low gleam just enough to see hammer marks without searing retinas. A mother nurses her infant beneath a tallow wick that sputters gently, its red glow wrapping both in a cocoon of hormonal calm, prolactin for her, melatonin for the baby. Tasks conclude naturally when the wick gutters, not when a digital timer chirps. The room itself dictates healthy boundaries. Finish your weaving. Cap the ale barrel. Breathe. Night has claimed its ground. Safety still matters. So a sentry tends the hearth through the small hours. He feeds pencil-thin slivers of birch to keep embers alive without pushing brightness past that candle-level plateau. His eyes adapt within seconds when he steps outside to check the yard, precisely because they never left the low-light zone. Back indoors, he resumes his place near the trench while the hall rests undisturbed. No one wakes to glaring overheads or the jolt of a lantern crash. Even the livestock remain calm, lulled by the same faint flicker. The sensory blend of dim amber and crackle does more than spare melatonin. It lowers blood pressure, steadies heart rate. Variability, and primes the vagus nerve, the body's built-in brake pedal. Modern studies now confirm what the Longhouse demonstrated. Nightly subjects exposed to pure red light before bed fall asleep faster, produce more REM, and wake fewer times. Yet the Vikings arrived at this protocol without a single spectrometer proof that observing nature's cues can beat measuring them. You can claim the same advantage today. Swap cold LEDs for low-watt amber bulbs rated under 2000 Kelvin. Shield them with opaque shades so light washes downward like a hearth glow rather than blasting every surface. Use one lamp, not 6, and place it below eye level to mimic the fire's origin on the floor. Reserve brighter task. Lighting for dinner cleanup. Then fade to amber within an hour of bed. If you crave true authenticity or just want to slow thoughts to saga tempo, light a beeswax or tallow candle. Its faint honey aroma and gentle flicker tug your nervous system toward parasympathetic rest as surely as any guided breathing app. Guard screens as fiercely as Vikings guarded property lines. Every phone and tablet emits a spike of blue that shouts sunrise into photoreceptors. Stalling melatonin for 90 minutes or more. If work traps you at a monitor after sunset, equip glasses with amber filters or switch to software that trains displays toward warm spectra. Better yet, Adopt the Viking rhythm finish strenuous business before twilight. Then let evening belong to low-tech crafts, soft talk, and mellow flames. With light tamed, even minor wake-ups feel benign. When you stir between sleeps, the room greets you with the same dim red signature. No blinding bathroom fixture. No fridge light searing a midnight snack into retina memory. You sip water by candlelight. Jot a dream. Maybe stretch beneath the rafters. Then slide back beneath wool. Because illumination never crossed daylight thresholds. Melatonin never crashed. Slipping under again is effortless. Dawn eventually yawns open like embers catching new fuel. Pale gray slips through the smoke hole and kisses the rafters. Inside, wick flames look suddenly vivid, signaling the night's contract has ended. You snuff them with a twist of wet moss. A thin thread of smoke curls upward and dissolves. Instantly, cortisol and serotonin flood your bloodstream, primed to meet true daylight rather than imitations. You rise light-footed, senses clear, joints loose. Outside, the horizon blushes rose and gold just as your optic nerves demand their full spectrum. Synchrony complete. As you shoulder tools for the day's work, consider what truly powered last night's rest, not just darkness, but curated darkness shadow sculpted by ember and wick into an environment that tells every cell, now is the time to mend. You can't move into a turf-roofed hall, but you can borrow its script. Dim sooner. Warm your hue. Let flame replace filament when possible, and treat every lumen after dusk as either friend or thief. Do that, and you'll reclaim a piece of Viking endurance with each dawn you greet. Calm and unhurried, under a sky turning from ember to blue. As the last candle sputters out, the red glow your eyes had followed all evening fades into velvet darkness. Yet instead of feeling alone, you sense bodies breathing gently on either side of you, heartbeats layering like a muted drum circle. The Vikings understood that the safest, warmest night wasn't spent in solitude, but shoulder to shoulder. So they built their sleeping platforms as continuous benches lining the length of the hall. You climb onto one of those wide planks now, knees brushing wool blankets already warmed by earlier arrivals. And at once, the air between pelts and timber turns into a small, shared microclimate. Heat radiates from neighbor to neighbor, pooling under the low rafters, letting every sleeper relax without shivering or fretting over dying embers. The genius lies in the simple geometry. 2 long platforms hug the walls, raised a foot above the packed earth floor to dodge drafts that sneak under the door. This elevation also places you closer to the roof's thatch, where rising warmth lingers. In summer, straw mattresses thin to let cool air slip beneath. In winter, extra fleece pads the gap, creating an organic thermostat. Your circadian rhythm reads as perfect. When your skin registers that steady, neutral temperature neither clammy nor cold, your brain stops issuing cortisol alerts and slips effortlessly into slow-wave sleep. You tuck a folded cloak behind your neck and feel straw crackle gently, distributing weight with surprising comfort. No spring squeak, no memory foam traps heat. Instead, rye stalks wick away moisture while flexing just enough to cradle hips and shoulders. You notice how your spine straightens, vertebrae stacking in quiet alignment. And you realize why sagas praise warriors who could row for 14 hours, yet wake without stiffness. Their nights were spent decompressing joints instead of sinking into plushness that curves the back like a question mark. Across the aisle, a mother pulls her toddler close, draping a shared bearskin over them both. The child's tiny fist unclenches almost immediately, lulled by the rhythmic rise and fall of his mother's chest. Oxytocin floods them both. lowering blood pressure and synchronizing heart rates. Effects modern researchers now document in co-sleeping studies, but which Vikings practiced by necessity. Adults. 2. Gain that hormonal boost. When you inhale, you catch the faint scent of pine tar from a nearby cloak, the grassy sweetness of dried rushes, and under it all the musky reassurance of healthy human presence. Your amygdala, forever scanning for saber-toothed threats, reads those cues as proof of kin and relaxes its night watch. Communal sleep also shares vigilance. In a hall of 20 people, no single person must stay hyper-alert to every creak outside. The group's staggered breathing patterns and natural cycles of light, waking means someone is always half aware, ready to feed the fire or investigate a distant howl. You sense that safety net subconsciously. Muscles unclench, jaw slackens, and the micro-awakening you struggle with in a silent apartment simply never arrives. Melatonin flows undisturbed, knitting muscle fibers and filing memories into long-term storage. There is etiquette, of course. Heavy snorers claim spots nearest the far door, where cool air masks their rumble. Night weaners nap closer to the hearth to soothe sudden cries. Elders, who rise often to stretch worn knees, choose edges so their movements ripple outward rather than jostle the whole bench. The unwritten rules give everyone room to turn or shift without a chorus of sorries and ambient choreography you learn by feel within a night or two. Remarkably, the lack of personal mattresses reduces territorial instinct. You're lying on shared infrastructure, so you treat neighbors with instinctive respect. At some point past midnight, you half-wake to roll over, and a soft rustle tells you the woman 2 spaces down has risen for a drink. She pads past, careful to keep her footfalls against the timber edge so vibrations fade before they reach you. Moments later, she returns, tucking herself back under fur. The entire exchange is wordless. No need for apologies in a culture where middle-night movement is expected and easily absorbed by communal warmth. Physiology mirrors architecture. Carbon dioxide levels rise slightly in the crowded hall, nudging you deeper into parasympathetic mode. Body temperature regulation becomes a collective undertaking, smoothing individual spikes that normally yank you from REM. Even acoustics play a role. The low roof, stuffed with moss, scatters sound so evenly that coughs dissolve into white noise rather than sharp jabs. You drift, dream, drift again, cycling through 90-minute phases as seamlessly as the tides outside. When dim gray finally filters through the smoke hole, the communal platform turns into a living machine of momentum. One sleeper sits up, swinging legs off the edge. The shift tilts a shared blanket just enough to brush your shoulder, signaling dawn more softly than any trumpet. Others rise in domino fashion, folding pelts, shaking straw mats outside, laughing in low voices that climb with the sunlight. Because you slept among them, you wake synchronized, no lag. No grogginess, ready to row or harvest side by side without that hour of solitary coffee most modern folks need to reboot. Carry the lesson home, and you quickly see why your queen-sized mattress can feel like an island at sea. Humans evolved to doze in clusters, sharing warmth, hormones, and subtle night watches. You don't need to invite your entire block into the bedroom, but a few tweaks capture the essence. Swap your fluffy heat-trapping topper for a firmer, breathable pad. Trade synthetic quilts for layered wool that regulates temperature like fur. And if you sleep with a partner, consider a wider joint support surface instead of 2 saggy indents that isolate movement. Weighted blankets mimic the calming press of nearby bodies, while white noise machines approximate communal breath, both small hacks, yet grounded in Viking wisdom. You can even borrow their social routine. End your digital evening, not alone in blue light, but in shared quiet, Read aloud. Play soft acoustic music. Exchange foot rubs. Let bedtime be a collective unwinding so no one carries adrenaline beneath the sheets. If someone must wake at 2 a.m., let them keep a red filter flashlight and practice silent footfalls, preserving the melatonin envelope for everyone else. Most of all, understand that good rest is cooperative. Your sleep influences your partner's cortisol levels the next morning. Your toddler's midnight whimper gauges your heartbeat. Your dog, curled at your feet, steadies blood pressure you'll never consciously notice. The Vikings didn't articulate these metrics, yet their longhouse proved them nightly. By re-embracing communal cues, warmth, rhythm, quiet vigilance, you turn the bedroom from a battleground against insomnia into a village of physiological allies. As dawn paints your modern curtains peach, remember the sensation of those straw benches, firm, breathable, alive with rhythmic breathing around you, and ask what parts of that architecture you can rebuild today. Maybe it's as simple as setting a cooler thermostat, laying a wool throw over cotton sheets, or letting the cat keep her post at your calves instead of banishing her to the hallway. Each choice edges you closer to that Viking morning swagger, the kind that steps into cold air with lungs already full and mind already steady. Because when sleep becomes a shared ritual instead of a solitary struggle, you wake not just rested, but fortified, ready to greet the sun beside every ally who helped guard the night. The longhouse quiets, yet the scents around you keep weaving stories: earthy rye straw, musky wool, and now a faint sweetness drifting from the hearth. Someone has set a small clay pot to simmer, and wisps of steam carry notes of valerian and dried hops. You watch the mixture swirl, amber against dull firelight, and realize the Vikings treated bedtime like a gentle uphill path rather than a cliff's edge. After the bench's shared warmth steadied every pulse, a final ritual sealed the night herbal calm steeped into bone and breath. You crouch beside the healer as she lifts the lid and releases a richer wave peppery mugwort layered with citrusy linden flower. She portions a ladleful into a horn cup and passes it your way. The brew tastes mildly bitter, but honey softens the edge and invites a deeper exhale. Valerian roots harvested at midsummer lend an earthy undertone that nudges eyelids heavier. Hops cones, dried in low sun, whisper drowsiness straight to the brain's GABA receptors. Linden melts tension from temples to toes. No single herb overpowers the others, like the hall itself. The drink is a blend of modest ingredients that harmonize into something far greater than their sum. While you sip, she ties tiny linen sachets filled with lavender to hang above infants' cradles. The aroma floral, green, a shade primitive yet familiar, floats over straw mattresses like invisible lullabies. Modern labs will someday confirm that lavender reduces sympathetic nervous activity. Tonight, you only feel a slow warmth spread through the chest and a quiet inside the skull where restless thoughts once echoed. Nearby, someone stuffs fresh hops into a small woven pillow, shaking loose yellow lupulin dust that shimmers briefly in the fire glow. That dusty resin carries mild sedative alkaloids, but the Vikings likely relied on smell as much as chemistry, the garden's memory pressed between linen threads. Herbs find other paths too. A father massages melted tallow laced with chamomile onto calloused hands so cracks won't burn in tomorrow's rope work. As the salve cools, steam rises faintly, wafting apple-sweet chamomile straight to his nose. A youth scrapes spruce resin into a shallow bowl of ale, letting tree sap and fermented grain mingle. One soothes sore throats, the other eases social knots. But together they settle his breath for the long second sleep ahead. Even the animals benefit. The cow in the pen receives a fistful of melissa leaves to chew, calming her rumbles so no one startles at midnight. You follow the healer outside, feet crunching frost, to the herb shed, a lean-to gated by woven hazel branches. Inside hang rows of plants upside-down valerian, catmint, yarrow, nettle, boneset. Bundles dangle like dusky chandeliers, each labeled with a carved rune. She fingers a stalk, tests brittleness, and snips off crumble-ready leaves. Nothing here is exotic. Every stalk once grew in nearby bog or meadow. Yet, through trial and tale, the community learned which soothed fevers, which staunched wounds, and which led the body gently toward dreams. Back in the hall, you grind 2 pinches of lemon balm with a sliver of birch bark in a stone mortar. The smell bright. Evergreen cuts through smoky air, clearing sinuses as it clears worry. You sprinkle a bit into the communal pot, stirring slow so oils bloom. Across the benches, conversations drop to murmur. Hips shuffle for final comfort. Pelts rise over shoulders. Your own body hears the unspoken cue. This is the last light before rest. By the time you crawl beneath your blanket, a cozy heaviness coats limbs. Breath slows. Thoughts loosen. If you wake during the midpoint, the herbal tide still lingers, letting muscles melt back to straw with minimal chatter. Prolactin climbs unchallenged. Dreams lengthen, colored by faint scents of field and forest. When dawn brushes rafters, you rise clear-eyed, a restoration you'll later trace back to those subtle plant allies rather than sleep aid tablets that hammer consciousness shut. Modern life can borrow this quiet pharmacopoeia without foraging the North Atlantic. You start by stocking a shelf with valerian root, passion flower, chamomile, lemon balm, and whole cone hops. Measure them loosely, no need for pharmaceutical decimals. Viking's trusted nose and tongue. Steep in water just off a boil for 10 minutes. Cover to capture volatile oils. Sweeten lightly if desired. Inhale before you drink. Half the medicine is aromatic. Reserve this blend for an hour before lights dim, letting the ritual itself cue the nervous system that work and scrolling have ended. Mind the carrier, too. Vikings used glazed pots or horn cups that retained heat without scorching herbs. You can reach for ceramic over plastic, wood spoon over metal. Small tactile signals that separate the brew from daytime coffee. If you share a household, pour for everyone. Collective sipping multiplies the calming effect. Just as the longhouse multiplied warmth, for children, dilute heavily and spotlight gentle herbs like linden and lavender. For elders, add ginger slivers to aid digestion and keep nighttime aches at bay. Extend the practice beyond liquid. Slip a lavender-filled sachet into your pillowcase. Scatter hops inside an open cotton bag near the headboard. If your room hosts restless electronics, hide them beneath cedar wood soaked in a few drops of chamomile essential oil. The scent nudges mind away from email and toward meadow. Even topical balms echo Viking salves, mix beeswax and olive oil warmed with chamomile or calendula. Spread across forearms, and let the subtle fragrance ride the bloodstream inward. Science now quantifies what the longhouse proved. Valerian can shorten sleep latency by 15 minutes. Hops and passion flower increase time spent in deep stages. Lavender lowers heart rate variability within 10. But numbers matter less than rhythm. The herb garden reframed sleep as a continuum fire's glow. Warm benches, quiet laughter, steaming brew, each station a stepping stone toward unconsciousness. You adopt that model by making tea. Prep the hinge between amber lights and bed. When the kettle sings, phones rest face down. When steam curls, conversation softens. When cups empty, covers rise, and the night receives you unhindered. Outside the longhouse, dawn's chill sharpens. But you walk out fueled by more than calories, Valerian still whispers mantra slow through veins. Linden cushions, morning jitters. Lavender lingers on cuffs. Tasks feel lighter. Focus steadier. Resilience thicker. You understand now why sagas speak of warriors rowing unbroken leagues and farmers scything all day without midday stupor, their sleep recipe brewed in fields and cracked between mortars, not poured from blister packs. So tonight, as you stand at your own stove, scatter dried petals into water and imagine the healer's patient smile. Let steam rise past dim lamp, glow the shade of fire. Breathe deep. Sip slow, and feel the modern world mute its neon chatter. Every swallow is a handshake with ancestors who learned that plants could soften the line between waking concerns and the vast, repairing dark. And when you finally close your eyes, may your dreams drift through meadows of valerian and hops, guided by the gentle truth the Vikings taught. Sometimes the strongest shield is a humble cup of herbs shared before the embers fade. The herbal warmth still lingers on your tongue when the memory of your last meal flickers into focus, because in this longhouse, supper ended hours before moonrise. You can almost retrace the steps the big iron cauldron lifted from the fire at dusk, ladles of barley and fish stew poured into wooden bowls, the quick clink of horn spoons against rims, and then a deliberate closing ritual. Once bowls were licked clean, they were stacked, rinsed at the well, and stowed high on a shelf, so no one would be tempted to nibble through the night. Vikings understood, instinctively, that letting the stomach rest long before bedtime allowed the rest of the body to rest. 2. Without the heavy churn of late digestion, blood could flow freely to muscles and brain, patching the day's small tears instead of shuttling nutrients around a busy gut. You feel that calm emptiness now, a lightness just below the ribcage that modern science calls optimal gastric clearance. There's no acidic burn, no bloated tightness, only a gentle hollowness that tells the vagus nerve it's safe to downshift. In response, your heart rate dips a few beats. Parasympathetic mode takes the helm, and the lullaby of slow-wave sleep sounds its opening chord. Compare that to the nights when you angle drive a midnight pizza slice and later stare at the ceiling as your core temperature spikes and your liver scrambles to metabolize grease and alcohol. Vikings escaped that cycle by necessity. Food preserved poorly, and firewood was finite. But what began as pragmatism evolved into an intuitive chrononutrition strategy that modern gastroenterologists can only admire. Rewind to late afternoon and watch how the final meal sets the stage. The stew itself is a study in balanced chunks of oily salmon glisten beside chewy barley. Carrots and parsnips lend slow-release carbs, and a handful of fermented seaweed slips in probiotics that keep gut flora happy for the long winter. A few swigs of thin ale rinse everything down a brew low in alcohol, rich in B vitamins, and mild enough to hydrate rather than dehydrate. No refined sugar, no fried white dough, no dense cream sauces to swamp a tired pancreas. Even the portion size obeys a quiet rule: fill the belly 2/3. Leave 1/3 for air and movement. Elders enforce that maxim by example, pushing wooden bowls away while a spoonful still clings to the sides. Sunset finds everyone moving, stowing nets, folding cloaks, sweeping stray straw into pens so post-meal glucose spikes are blunted by light activity. The children race around chasing one another with willow switches, laughter spiraling up to the rafters. Adults lug salted fish slabs to the storage pit or hoist barrels onto sledges, heartbeats rising just enough to shepherd carbs into muscle glycogen where they'll serve tomorrow's oar strokes. By the time dusk deepens into full night, circulating insulin has dipped, growth hormone is ready to surge, and no one's gut is busy enough to interrupt the nightly repair crew. When you finally crawled under fur a couple of hours ago, that empty enough stomach allowed your core temperature to drop like a smooth stone. Exactly the cue your hypothalamus needs to dive off the high board into deep sleep. Without food fermenting below, you avoided the nocturnal reflux that jolts so many modern sleepers upright, hearts racing. You also dodged the glucose rebound that sneaks in around 2 a.m. after a late, sugary dessert, sending adrenaline to rescue blood sugar and yanking consciousness to the surface. Your bloodstream remains a flat, calm sea. Dreams glide across it without hitting metabolic turbulence. The health dividends keep stacking while you sleep. Human growth hormone peaks soon after you enter slow-wave cycles, knitting muscle fibers and thickening bone matrix. Crucial for people who spend daylight hefting oars or swinging axes. If a belly is still busy with steak and mead, that hormone is forced to multitask, prioritizing digestion over tissue repair. The Viking's early supper hands the full hormonal budget to restoration, and you reap the benefit each dawn when shoulders feel loose, not knotted, and knees greet frost without complaint. Long voyages and relentless farm seasons didn't break them because nights were a workshop of cellular maintenance, free from the distractions of late-night indulgence. Fast forward to breakfast, and you see the circle close. Vikings didn't charge into daylight with donuts and sweetened coffee. They broke fast, cautiously. A cup of warm whey, perhaps, or rye flatbread with clotted cream and dried lingonberries. Food gentle enough to wake the gut, gracefully yet protein-dense enough to restock amino acids burned in muscle repair. Because you went to bed on an empty stomach, morning hunger rings clear. Not frantic. You eat slowly, letting satiety signals arrive before you overfill. This replenishment keys up circadian rhythms. Insulin peaks in daylight. Cortisol tapers by mid-morning, and melatonin files itself away until night beckons again. Translate that arc to modern life, and you start by pushing dinner earlier. Aim for sundown if possible, or 3 hours before lights out at minimum. Choose meals that echo the stew-lean protein, fibrous roots, unprocessed grains, fermentation for a probiotic nudge. Skip neon desserts and high-proof nightcaps that promise relaxation but steal REM cycles once their ethanol turns to acetaldehyde. After the dishes are washed, do something lightly active. Walk the dog. Tidy a shelf. Stretch on the living room floor so glucose trickles into muscle rather than pooling in the bloodstream. Then close the kitchen the way Vikings latched their wooden cabinets. No grazing. No fridge glow. No just one-bite rationalizations. Teach your body to trust that the next meal will come with dawn. If hunger whispers late, brew that herbal tea you learned about earlier. Valerian's bitterness dampens appetite pangs, while chamomile's mild sweetness satisfies oral fixation. Keep fruit on the tree and nuts in the sack, tomorrow's fuel. Not tonight's. Over time, your hormones will sink ghrelin, the "I'm hungry" signal will peak earlier. Leptin, the satiety governor, will whisper, "Done quicker." And cortisol will slide off its evening slope without the bumps created by postprandial traffic jams. One subtle perk emerges after a few weeks' dream clarity. Without late-night digestion hogging oxygen, your brain's glymphatic system flushes more waste proteins, clearing synapses for high-definition REM narratives. Viking sagas often reference vivid, prophetic dreams, visions of ravens guiding ships or wolves guarding settlers, while folklore colors the tales. Neuroscience suggests a biological boost. Better dream recall correlates with stable blood sugar throughout the night. By timing supper like the Norse, you might not foresee raven omens, but you will wake with plots intact rather than shredded by metabolic alarms. Finally, consider the communal layer. Early supper frees the hearth for those herbal brews and for quiet storytelling that strengthens bonds and readies minds for rest. It also reduces fire hazard. No hissing fat dripping into coals while half the hall sleeps. In your home, An earlier meal grants the same gift of time, an hour unburdened by cooking or digesting to read aloud. Play guitar, or simply share idle conversation under dim amber light. Family members learn one another's cadences. Children internalize the rhythm of wind down. And everyone climbs into bed with cortisol low and connection high. So tonight, when twilight rolls across your windows, imagine that wooden ladle being stowed and the cauldron lid set in place. Clear the counter, rinse the mugs, and let the kitchen fall into hush. Step into that hush with a short walk, a stretch, and a cup of valerian hops tea cooling between hands. Feel the space bloom in your torso where food once sloshed, and trust that emptiness to cradle you. Sleep will come smoother, deeper, and when dawn pries open the sky, you'll rise light carried not by caffeine, but by the quiet power of a body that finished its work hours ago and spent the night simply renewing itself. Viking style. The glow of early supper still warms your chest as you step outside to rinse the wooden ladle. And in the lingering dusk, you start to see how the Vikings composed each dish like a lullaby for the body. Yesterday you noticed the timing, how the cauldron left the fire well before night took hold, but tonight you pay attention to the ingredients themselves: sturdy barley, oily salmon, earthy root vegetables, and a handful of tangy, fermented seaweed slipping between them like a quiet drumbeat. You kneel at the well, swirl the ladle through cold water, and realize this wasn't just survival cuisine. It was chemical choreography designed to coax neurotransmitters into balance long before heads touched straw. When you return to the longhouse, the cook is layering tomorrow's supplies: dried cod packed in salt, smoked mutton, sacks of groats, clay pots of skyr so thick the spoon stands upright. Every bite tells a metabolic story. The fish gleam with omega-3 fats your brain craves to forge the membranes around neurons. Fats modern researchers link to steadier mood and deeper REM sleep. The groats carry B vitamins that shepherd tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier, so darkness can flip it into serotonin. And, finally, melatonin. The skyr holds casein protein that digests slowly, leveling blood sugar through dawn without spiking insulin. Even the seaweed, cured in brine and rolled tight like little green scrolls, supplies iodine for a thyroid that must keep fires inside muscles stoked as the North Atlantic wind howls outside. You help the cook stow smoked beets and carrots into a cool pit beneath the floorboards, and their faint sweetness rises like perfume. Those roots, rich in complex carbs, will release glucose as steadily as a bee hums, avoiding the sugar cliffs that topple minds into midnight panic. The Vikings had no glycemic index charts, yet centuries of frost and voyage taught them which foods kept a rower's arms pumping through 7-foot swells without crashing later. Later, as a sliver of moon rides above the smoke hole, you sit cross-legged near the hearth with a wooden cup of thin ale, just 3% alcohol. More probiotic than intoxicating. A mild buzz loosens shoulders. But there's no ethanol flood to shred REM cycles or yank you awake to gulp water. Malt enzymes and yeast left B6 magnesium, and lactobacilli swirling in each sip. A microbiome massage modern craft breweries try to recreate. You remember late-night cocktails back home that promised relaxation only to leave you glassy-eyed at 3 a.m. This earthy brew feels more like a long exhale than a sedative hammer. Across the bench, a trader unwraps dried bilberries to share. You roll one between fingers. Noticing its inky glaze, the fruit is dense with anthocyanins that mop up oxidative stress from hours spent hauling timber. As you chew, a tart burst spreads across the tongue, followed by an almost peppery finish. In this haul, dessert does more than satisfy the sweet tooth. It repairs the day's cellular fray, so tomorrow's tasks don't chip further into your reserves. The cook hands you a small clay pot of fermented goat whey to sample. It looks like cloudy lemonade, but tastes tangy, slightly salty, and faintly effervescent. Rich in electrolytes, calcium, and glutathione precursors. It prehydrates muscles before dawn chores. More importantly, for sleep, its GABA-boosting peptides hush neuronal chatter. You swallow and feel that subtle hush settle under your sternum, like someone dimming a lantern behind the ribs. Everything here is local, seasonal, empirically tested by centuries of hard winters and harder voyages, yet the menu feels oddly modern omega-3s, whole grains, fermented dairy, antioxidant fruits. Nutritionists today piece together similar sleep-supportive plates, marketing them with blue and white logos. But the Vikings executed the concept with nothing more than observation and oral tradition. They noticed which combinations let warriors wake limber, which teas calmed racing thoughts, which foods kept teeth strong enough to tear new rope. Their diet was, in essence, a threaded safety net stretched beneath nightly rest. You help grind toasted barley for tomorrow's porridge and see how the routine itself prepares mind and body. Repetitive. Rhythmic motion lowers cortisol, and the nutty aroma rising from the stone quern signals hypothalamus and stomach alike that fuel is on schedule. Predictability is its own sedative. Circadian clocks thrive on meals that land the same hour every day, as reliable as the sun angling past the ridge. When the last chores end, you notice the hall's collective posture, shoulders loose, voices soft, jaws unfurrowed. Tryptophan has begun its trek toward pineal transformation. Magnesium from the greens earlier has curled around ion channels, easing clenched calves. Little pulses of vitamin D from dried cod liver will, come dawn, collude with calcium to rebuild bone matrix taxed by rowing. Nourishment and rest are already intertwining before anyone reclines. Translating the lesson to your own kitchen starts with thinking like the cook gather colors, textures, and fermentation. Bake salmon with lemon and dill instead of frying hamburger. Ladle barley miso soup rather than microwaving noodles slick with palm oil. Swap sugar-dense soda for kefir or low-alcohol kombucha that nudges gut bugs toward harmony. Pair protein with whole carbs and greens so tryptophan travels the metabolic highway unblocked. Keep portions practical. Let dessert be a handful of berries, a square of dark chocolate, or Greek yogurt dripped with honey, not a half pint of ice cream that sends insulin rocketing skyward. Timing matters too. Serve the last plate at dusk, then take a stroll. Wipe counters. Set the kettle for sleep tea, letting digestion cruise into low gear before bed. If hunger taps later, answer with herbal tea or a single boiled egg. Not cheese fries at midnight. On weekends, honor the rhythm. Attend Petrum. Feast is a thrown wrench in biological gears you spent all week oiling. In the longhouse, you stretch, yawn, and drift toward your straw bed, muscles buoyed by amino acids, mind swaddled in the knowledge that every cell received its proper ration. Tomorrow, chopping ice to free the boat lines, you'll feel it a steady, elastic energy rather than caffeine sparks. Lunch will be dried fish, onions, and rye bread, plugging midday gaps without crashing sugar. Evening will bring more stew, more bilberries, more whey, another loop in the seamless circle of feed and rest. You pull the hide over your shoulders. Somewhere a spoon lands quietly in an empty bowl. A hum grows in the hall, the combined vibration of hearts settling into slow cadence. Outside, a faint aurora slides across the sky. And inside, your bloodstream mirrors that shimmer magnesium softening vessels. EPA oils keeping platelets supple, melatonin seeping like midnight ink. You close your eyes, trusting the pantry behind the hearth to whisper right through the dark, fueling dreams, patching sinew, loading tomorrow with potential. Because when food answers the body's chronicle instead of fighting it, night is no longer a battle, but a pact. Nourish. Surrender. Rise renewed. Hay bales still steam from the morning sun when you tighten the last knot on the sled and haul it toward the fjord. A cool spray leaps from the oar blades, splattering your forearms with points of salt that dry into crystals even before you dock. Breakfast's omega-3 glow the salmon, the whey. The rye now powers shoulders that move like hinges greased with whale oil. Here the point isn't exercise for exercise's sake. It's motion braided into survival. Every swing of the axe or thrust of the spade writing daylight's chapter in muscle memory, so the night can later write its answer in repair. Rowing out. You feel the whole crew settle into cadence. Inhale on the pull. Exhale on the glide. 20 heartbeats threaded to a single rising tide. Your thighs burn, then warm, then hum. And that hum is adenosine gathering in the brain, laying quiet claim to the sleep debt you'll pay off gladly once the stars pry open the sky. Sunlight slants off basalt cliffs, hammering photoreceptors with blue-rich beams that flatten melatonin to the mat and crank serotonin into gear. The rhythm teaches your endocrine system the difference between high noon and deep midnight. So hormones won't wander off schedule and shadowbox in the dark. Mid-mornings you haul nets heavy with cod, each fish gleaming like a silver ingot. Backs bend and straighten, until motion feels less like work than a tide running through vertebrae. Sweat pushes salt and trace toxins out through skin. Brisk wind wicks moisture away, leaving a cooling film that lowers core temperature just enough to keep muscles firing clean. Every gasp of cold air clears metabolic exhaust, pushing oxygen to tissues that will later need it to stitch themselves stronger in slow-wave sleep. No fitness app tracks these metrics, yet your body logs them anyway, chalking up calorie burn, UV-prompted vitamin D synthesis, and the microscuffs in muscle fibers that cue nighttime growth hormone. By midday, the crew beaches the craft and trudges inland, shoulders staggered under wicker baskets of catch. You trade oars for scythes, stepping into fields where barley nods under a lazy breeze. Swing, arc, thud each pass, loads glutes and hamstrings, coaxing them into a controlled burn that will email your hypothalamus with a single instruction: replenish tonight. Sunlight still pours onto forearms, triggering nitric oxide release that widens capillaries and bolsters the immune army. Modern researchers would murmur about circadian phase advance and mitochondrial biogenesis. You just notice that. By late afternoon, limbs feel gently spent, pleasantly heavier than when dawn cracked open. Lunch is simple dried fish ripped with a thumb across the grain, rye bread dense as a tool handle, onions so pungent they bite back. Chewing sends glucose in a slow trickle, refilling muscle glycogen without the sugar roller coaster. You wash it down with chilled spring water that snaps off thirst without overloading kidneys. Then you hoist barrels, patch sails, split pine for the hearth, each task different enough to spread the load, varied enough to leave no joint crying mutiny. There's no leg day, arm day, or corporate gym mirror. Every angle of movement gets its share. And by dusk, the cumulative tally tallies to what sports science calls functional strength. Evening finds you carting the last haul of spruce logs to the yard. Splitting rounds with a hand axe feels almost meditative. Wrist, elbow, and shoulder pivot in a concert unheard by urban joints. Every strike rattles bone down to heel, sending piezoelectric whispers through skeleton that osteoblasts translate into thicker trabeculae come deep sleep. You sense the day's engine winding down. Cortisol ebbs. Body heat drifts lower as the sun drags pink across the ridge, and a breeze slips between tunic laces, cooling damp cloth until fabric hugs skin like a cold compress. Dinner sparks under the stew cauldron. Root veg, barley, cod head all ladled into bowls big enough for both hands. Protein refuels torn fibers. Slow carbs refill liver stores. Mineral-rich broth tops off electrolytes lost to sweat. But crucially, spoon scrapes rim well before dusk dims, leaving digestion a decent runway before you recline. A half hour of light cleanup follows scrubbing pots, hanging nets an easy glide that gently coaxes circulating glucose where it belongs into muscle, not bloodstream static that would sabotage midnight tranquility. As darkness takes the rafters and candles shrink to red seeds, you feel fatigue that is neither sharp nor dull, but perfectly pitched a weight in limbs paired with lightness in the mind. Adenosine now swirls thick as cream in neural gaps, tugging eyelids with a softness no sleeping pill can imitate. You draw the shared pelt to your chin, sense neighbors' warmth against your back, and notice how breath falls into an unforced depth, each exhale longer than the last. Somewhere, growth hormone begins its surge, and microtears from ore and axe trivialize themselves beneath an invisible scaffold of protein strands. Slow wave sleep arrives like tide filling a cove, silent, unstoppable, cool. Calcium hustles into bone, collagen fibers weave across tiny fractures, and mitochondria refuel for another 18-hour marathon. In dream space, you relive the Rao rhythm or the scythe arc, not as work, but as fluid dance. REM storms follow, filing motor patterns into muscle memory so tomorrow's first stroke will land cleaner, deeper, stronger. External stillness meets internal construction. The hall, dark as a cave, becomes a blacksmith shop for flesh and nerve. By dawn, when pale light brushes smoke whole edges, you rise not with groan, but with hungry grin. Delts feel full. Tendon aches are mere echoes, and the first arm swing outside tells you the night's renovation succeeded. In that moment, you understand why sagas praise warriors who could sprint ashore after days at sea. Their sleep debts were cleared nightly by the union of honest labor and honest rest. Today, we'll write another chapter of exertion, and tomorrow another of repair. A cycle as predictable as lunar tides, yet as adaptable as weather. Bring this principle home, and you translate oars into dumbbells, scythes into garden rakes, log splitting into kettlebell swings, anything that loads big muscles and opens lungs beneath open sky. Let morning sun slap your retina, sweat salt your lips, quadriceps burn just shy of cramp. Skip the fluorescent gym until after sunrise. Chase light first, numbers later. Walk or pedal instead of scrolling in rideshare seats. Stack errands, scrub floors, wrestle the dog, heft groceries in cloth sacks. Motion is medicine only when it flirts with real fatigue. Then, crucially, time that motion early enough for body heat to drop by bedtime. Give muscles their amino pool. Give gut its quiet. Give mind its herbal bridge across dusk. And let dark do the rest. Don't fear the weariness that sets shoulders heavy. That weight is simply your ticket stamped for the next train to deep dreams. And when you wake, lungs clear and spine supple, you'll feel the Norse rhythm drumming beneath your ribs move hard. Eat wise. Rest deep. Repeat an ageless algorithm carved into oak beams, written in blistered palms, and sung aloud by oars kissing water at dawn. The sun that bullied your shoulders all afternoon is now slipping behind the ridge. And with that retreat, The village itself seems to exhale. You feel it first in the cadence of footsteps, once brisk and stomping, now deliberate, almost lazy, as every chore finds a natural endpoint. Nets are coiled but not mended, axes wiped but not sharpened, grain sacks stacked but not stitched. A hush spreads through muscle and mind, cueing every cell that the day's kinetic chapter has closed and a softer verse is beginning. The Vikings didn't need a smartwatch to chart this taper. They trusted the sky's dimming palette and the ache in their forearms to tell them it was time to decelerate. You follow the others to the hot spring that seeps from volcanic stone just beyond the sheep pens. Steam coils upward in the cool evening air, smelling faintly of iron and moss, and you sink to your collarbones with a sigh that seems to rise from marrow. Heat seeps into quads still buzzing from scythe swings, flushing lactate toward the surface where capillaries drink it away. Joints that clicked and complained now float, ligaments slackening under warmth. Modern physiologists would talk about vasodilation and parasympathetic rebound. You just feel nerves untie themselves. Knot by invisible knot, while moonlight paints ripples silver. Around you, conversation drifts soft, unhurried. Nothing like the shouted commands that snapped across the oars at dawn. One farmer recounts the time a seal pup surfaced in this very pool. Another jokes about the stew burning if they soak too long. Laughter comes easy in 104-degree water, its vibrations rolling through your chest as deeply as the heat does. Even your breath adjusts, lengthening on each exhale, pulling ambient serenity into alveoli. Later studies will show that warm immersion before bed raises core temperature just enough so the subsequent drop triggers quicker sleep onset. In the moment, you simply feel drowsy in the pleasant way that hints at dreams waiting just beyond steam. When skin wrinkles and firelight glows brighter than sky, you towel off with woven linen, the fabric scratchy enough to remind muscles they still exist. The walk back to the longhouse is slow, feet padding over packed dirt that's cooled since sunset. Inside, flames have shrunk to an amber spine, throwing gentle pulses across fur-draped benches. Children gather near the hearth, eyes reflecting fire as if each pupil holds its own tiny comet. A gray-bearded skald settles onto a stool, taps his knuckles against a drum made from goat hide, and begins a tale of sea serpents and star navigation. You stretch out on a bench, propped on an elbow, letting the rhythm of words massage the language centers of your brain the way hot water softened calves earlier. Storytelling here is more than entertainment. It's neural choreography. Vivid imagery paints delta waves before they crest, guiding cognition from analytical daylight into the associative twilight where dreams germinate. Your mind follows the narrative's rise and fall, mirroring the arc of cortisol ebbing in your bloodstream. As the skald's voice drops to a whisper, you feel a corresponding dip in heart rate, as if he is pulling levers inside your chest. There's no cliffhanger to jolt adrenaline, only the tidy closing line of a moral etched in metaphor, sealing mental files so synapses can file them away during REM. Even the light participates in the wind down. Someone flips a half-burned log with an iron poker, allowing it to collapse inward and smother its own flame. Sparks swirl up, blink out, and the hall dims from dusky orange to ember red. Shadows thicken, contours blur, and photoreceptors give up their chase, handing vision over to rods content with minimal glow. At this luminance, your pineal gland begins its melatonin cascade in earnest, a dark syrup pooling in the ventricles. Whispering to frontal cortex, let go. You yawn without shame. Everyone else is yawning, too. And that synchronized slackening only deepens the communal spell. Before bedding down, you roll shoulders and twist the spine in a slow stretch. Not the explosive exertions of daylight, but a gentle ringing that sends one last message to fascia. We are safe. You can soften. A quick sip of lukewarm whey finishes the cooling trend inside. Its mineral trace helps nerves misfiring from the day's strain to settle into smooth conduction. There is no chatter about tomorrow's quotas. No last-minute ledger balancing. Planning has its place at noon. Twilight belongs to letting cognitive gears freewheel until they coast to a halt. You slip beneath the shared pelt, now fragrant with wood smoke and faintly herbal from the sachets tucked overhead, around you. The hall's ambient noises have throttled down to a slow metronome crackle pop. Postpartum sigh. The distant creak of a roof beam cooling. Every sound is low frequency, the auditory equivalent of warm colors, and your thalamus filters them into a lullaby of environmental safety. A stray thought tries to surface. Did you stack the scythes under cover? But it dissolves before forming, eroded by the steady chemical tide swelling behind your eyes. Sleep arrives without fanfare, the seamless next step after a day's arc that narrowed from vigorous swing to whispered story. If you wake briefly in the middle of the night, the memory of hot water and calm voices still lingers, smoothing the passage back into darkness. By morning, cortisol will rise on schedule, unopposed by residual adrenaline because none was invited to the evening's table. You'll stand, shoulders loose, ready to row or reap anew. Back in your modern life, you translate the ritual by degrees, finish workouts well before sunset, then dial movement down brisk walk becomes casual stroll. Laptop clatter becomes paperback rustle. Trade fluorescent bathroom lights for a warm shower under dim bulbs. Let hot water raise core temperature so the post-bath drop cues sleep. Swap doom scrolling for a chapter of myth or gentle podcast, something with cadence rather than cliffhangers. Lower lights incrementally. Candle to nightlight to nothing. Matching the hall's ember choreography. Each step signals the limbic system the way drumbeats once signaled the crowd around the hearth. The war is over. Lay down arms. Time to dream. The Vikings didn't call it sleep hygiene. They called it living. Yet by respecting the body's appetite for gradual decrescendo, they crafted nights that stitched bodies and minds resilient enough to face frigid seas and fickle harvests. Follow their script: hot soak, quiet tail, tapering glow, and you'll feel the same hand at your back, guiding you gently into the dark, where tomorrow's strength is quietly, inevitably, forged. The embers pulse low as you ease into straw, yet your thoughts stay buoyant, an unhurried drift rather than anxious splash, because you carry one last Viking lesson. The night isn't an opponent to conquer, but a realm to explore. You've rowed hard, soaked muscles, dimmed flames. Now mind work begins, and attitude sets the anchor. Instead of bracing against wake-ups or tallying hours, you greet darkness like an old friend at the mead bench. In this culture, sleep isn't graded by strict 8-hour report cards. It's a flexible conversation with the gods, the ancestors, even the animals rustling beyond the wall. That outlook eases the grip you usually keep around productivity, loosening it until your inner chatter recedes to murmurs that blend with the crackle of ash. You hear the skald's last words still ringing, a moral delivered in metaphor, and realize stories give permission for uncertainty. If a saga can end on a half smile or open question, so can your night. A Viking drifting awake after first sleep doesn't curse the clock. He rolls onto an elbow, watches sparks spiral, and trusts the body's wisdom over society's deadlines. You adopt that stance now should your eyes part in the wee hours. You vow to interpret the moment as an intermission, not a failure. This single reframe dissolves the cortisol spike modern insomniacs know too well. Your pulse stays slow. Prolactin rides its gentle crest, and the limbic system logs safety instead of threat. Faith weaves through the attitude, but not in dogma's rigid syllables. The longhouse holds amulets, bits of whalebone etched with runes, a feather slipped beneath a toddler's pillow that embody hope more than superstition. By pinning a dream token above your own bedding, a twig of rowan, a coin from a departed grandparent, you tell the subconscious it's welcome here. Dreams, after all, are treated as messages, not meaningless static. Vikings wake at dawn, eager to share last night's visions, decoding colors and animals like navigators reading the sky. You promise yourself the same curiosity, keeping a charcoal stub and scrap of birch bark nearby to capture fragments before sunlight bleaches them. The act shifts the balance of power instead of fearing nightmares. You court whatever stories the brain chooses to screen. Gratitude threads the mindset. Subtle yet steady. As you lie amid communal breaths, you count today's gifts firm ground for barley sowing. A cod net heavy with silver. A spring warm enough to melt knots from shoulders. You recall moments of laughter in the steam, the scald's cadence, the child's sleepy giggle, and each memory lands like soft wool over the mind's sharper edges. Neuroscientists will someday confirm that gratitude before bed boosts serotonin and lowers inflammatory cytokines. Tonight, you simply feel warmer at the sternum, as if wrapped in an extra pelt. That warmth travels outward, persuading extremities to slacken and letting parasympathetic signals saturate every organ. Acceptance, finally, is the keystone. You understand storms may rattle the rafters or wolves may howl by the fence, and no incantation will erase those hazards. Instead, you accept that vigilance cycles among the sleepers tonight, your neighbor might stir before you. Tomorrow the duty may fall to your spine as you sense a shift in wind and rise to stoke coals. This shared responsibility dismantles the solo hero narrative that modern life forces onto each isolated bedroom. When safety becomes collective, personal anxiety loosens. Your mind can roam the dreamscape knowing others keep an ear tuned to real-world creaks. With attitude settled, you slide into the breather between first and second sleep. Eyes flutter open. But there's no jolt, only curiosity. You recall the rowan twig, breathe in its faint resin scent, and wonder what images triggered the wake-up. Perhaps a whale breached beneath moonlit waves. Perhaps a forge flashed sparks at your feet. You reach for the birch scrap, jot 2 runes, then let pen drop. All the while, melatonin still flows. Never bullied into retreat by panic, because you didn't label this wakefulness a glitch. A short stretch, a sip of honey-tinged tea left warm by hearthstones, and you recognize the pull to return. You obey, nestling back, trusting chemistry to finish the job. Second sleep feels silkier now. Dreams weave faster. Scenes more vivid because mindset greased the gears. With no inner critic measuring efficiency, your cortex ranges wider, filing daytime skills into memory vaults and braiding emotional threads into coherent tapestries. You dream of steering your oar crew through icy spray, yet feel no chill. The brain rehearses tomorrow's rhythm while bathing amygdala circuits in calming theta waves. Even a chasing wolf morphs at the last second into a friendly hound. Thanks to the gratitude layer you laid earlier, you wake near dawn smiling rather than gasping. Proof that attitude shapes storyline as surely as diet shapes hormones. Morning glimmers through the smoke hole. You rise, shake pelt dust onto floor rushes, and feel a lucid buoyancy awareness sharpened by narrative rest, not dulled by chemical sedation. You share your dream with the trader ladling whey the whale turned into a hill, the forge into sunrise. He nods, finds a meaning about safe passage and fruitful harvest, and his interpretation leaves both of you grinning. This communal decoding seals the psychological cycle, converting nocturnal images into daylight motivation. You shoulder your tools, convinced the cosmos winked approval overnight. and that quiet confidence threads into every swing of the scythe. Carry the practice home, and you start by editing inner dialogue. Replace "I must sleep now" with "I'll meet rest when it arrives." Store a notebook by the bed. Greet wake-ups with a question, not a curse. Pin a token of calm, a seashell. A dried herb above the pillow as rogues once pinned runes. Before lights out, catalog a trio of tiny victories, a task finished, a kind word traded, a sky color that stunned you. Should sleep fracture, sip water, stretch, observe breath, and trust the tide to return. Above all, let curiosity trump judgment. In that shift lies Viking serenity, the conviction that night is not lost time, but fertile ground where subconscious roots stretch, repair, and flower. When sunlight next nudges you awake, test the difference. Notice shoulders unknotted, mind alert without jitter, a faint storyline from dreamland still shimmering behind the eyes. That sheen is psychological resilience, forged from accepting the night's rhythm instead of wrestling it. You'll step into tasks with quiet focus, backed by the certainty that if challenges scar muscle or spirit, another dusk waits to spin them into myth and meaning. And each time darkness falls, the mindset you borrowed from the longhouse curiosity, gratitude, shared guardianship will be there to lower the drawbridge, inviting dreams across still water to whisper fresh strength into your bones. Dawn unfurls itself slowly across the fjord, violet giving way to pale gold, and you step into that bloom with lungs clear and a mind that feels freshly sharpened. Yesterday's work, yesterday's stories, they seem to line up neatly in memory, each detail where it belongs, as though the night's dreams filed them while you rested. You tighten the leather thong on your tunic, noticing how shoulders roll without creak or protest. Proof that the unseen nighttime weaver's growth hormone, collagen, prolactin, did their diligent stitching under cover of darkness. Across the yard, you spot the healer crouched beside the herb plot, fingertips brushing dew off valerian leaves. She straightens and waves you over. In her palm rests a single pale root, forked like a wishbone. She tells you it's time to transplant a new crop before the soil turns hard, and invites you to help. You kneel beside her, hands sliding into cool earth as the first full rays of sunlight kiss your nape. The task feels ceremonial, almost holy, moving a sleep plant from cramped pot to open bed so its future roots can stretch deep. Somewhere inside, a small click echoes yesterday's musings on honoring dreams merge seamlessly with this morning's act of cultivating what makes dreams gentle. Work ripples outward from that garden. The carpenter lugs freshly split pine planks to the shipyard. You help him hoist one onto trestles, and the two of you check the grain. With rested eyes, you notice trivial knots that daylight arrogance might miss flaws that could become leaks months later in storm-swelled seas. You score a faint line where the plank will be trimmed, and your hand moves steady, unhurried, guided by nerves that aren't jittery from caffeine or groggy from sleep debt. The carpenter nods approval, tapping knuckles on wood in quiet gratitude. Mid-morning brings the communal grindstone session. Everyone cues with axes, adzes, sickles, each blade nicked by yesterday's toil. You lock an axe head against the stone and begin the slow, rhythmic turn. Sparks spit, but you hold the blade at the precise angle, muscle memory flowing out of dream space into daylight action. Nearby, a young rower rubs sleepy eyes, admitting he stayed up late carving runes by torchlight. You share a knowing grin and recount the healer's advice: if inspiration strikes after first sleep, honor it briefly, but trust second sleep to finish the carving in your head. He laughs, says he'll try that tonight, and the message passes from rested limbs to restless youth like a friendly baton. Come noon, the cook rings a cowbell and everyone gathers by the cauldron. The meal is lighter than usual, just thin fish soup with wild sorrel and rye crusts, because the afternoon will be spent hauling driftwood for new roof beams. You swallow the herb-tangy broth, feeling citric brightness zing through veins. It's fuel that won't bog the gut when muscles need blood. You recall how last night's willingness to surrender control, letting sleep shape itself, mirrors this meal's humility enough, but not too much, leaving space for the next cycle of exertion and rest. After eating, the group fans out along the rocky shore, scanning for logs washed up by recent storms. Each time you lift a salt-bleached trunk, you anchor feet, engage core, and exhale on the heave. Movements sink again into communal rhythm, and with each surge you sense adenosine quietly tallying the day's debits, promising repayment later under fur and thatch. Clouds roll in by mid-afternoon, painting the sea pewter. But spirits stay buoyant because every back knows an evening soak and story lie ahead. The cycle reassures as surely as tide charts. Once internalized, it frees you to focus on present demands without dread of future fatigue. By late afternoon, muscles quiver pleasantly. A sign to throttle down. You and a few others carry the final load inland, stacking wood beside the longhouse. Someone suggests a game of Nataleaker before soaking. The spear thrower sets up targets, bundles of reeds tied into loose rings, and you each take turns hurling wooden balls. Your first throw lands just short, but there's no frustration, only laughter and playful jeers. Your second arcs true, sailing clean through the target. Cheers rise, echoing against hills. It strikes you how easily camaraderie blossoms when nights restore emotional bandwidth. Irritations that might flare in sleep-starved crowds dissolve here like salt in warm broth. Evening descends. Steam swirls above the hot spring again, inviting tired bodies as you sink into mineral heat. Conversation turns to tomorrow's voyage upriver to barter linen for iron. You plan watch rotations and cargo weight, but the talk drifts naturally to tales of river spirits and the small stone shrines dotting the banks. Practical and mythical, woven together exactly the way day and night, work and rest, waking and dream interlace. You lean back, ears half submerged, letting water hush the world to a distant murmur. Your heartbeat slows, imitating last night's cadence. Back in the hall, the skald produces a bone flute carved with wave motifs. The melody he coaxes out is plaintive, almost melancholic. But the chords resolve into gentle reassurance. You catch yourself swaying, eyelids dropping, vision blurring around firelight halos. Someone lays a pelt across your shoulders before you even think to reach for one. That small gesture typifies this culture of shared rest ethic, each person a guardian of another's ease. Later, when the flute's final note fades, you join the brief round of whispers, thanks for help at the grindstone, a reminder to pack whale oil lamps for the voyage. Then silence falls in earnest. You slip beneath blankets, fingers brushing the linen sachet of lavender above your head. A deep inhale carries wood smoke, herb, faint brine. The inner monologue that once chattered through city nights is now a soft tide tomorrow's ship, tomorrow's iron, tomorrow's sunrise. All doable, none looming. Sleep comes swiftly, but before it seals your senses, you sense a widening, an openness that wasn't there months ago, a trust in cycles larger than willpower. You realize the final gift of Viking rest isn't the mechanics of darkness or herbs or hot springs, though those matter. It's the cultural permission to be cyclic, imperfect, adaptable, to work hard. Yes, but then to release, to wake briefly without panic, dream boldly without judgment, rise refreshed without bragging. That permission is something you can ferry across centuries into any modern room, any overlit office, any restless mind. When dream finally sweeps you away, it carries the day's images of fish silver plank, dew-wet valerian, a bone flute's mellow arc. You feel the ship carving upriver, current hissing against hull, muscles loyal and ready. And somewhere above it all, constellations wheel steady as ever, mirroring the curves of your breath. In that harmony, night's work begins again. Silent, essential, unforced while you drift deeper, trusting the dark to empty and refill you just as it did those who first built this longhouse and handed down its wisdom of tides, of wood, of sleep that rises and recedes like water under a watchful moon. Your new ease with sleep's ebb and flow, that gentle faith you forged last night, proves equally powerful when seasons start shifting the rules. Winter descends first, sliding over the fjord like a thick wool blanket. You feel the change not just in the sharpened wind, but in the tempo of the longhouse itself. Work contracts toward the hearth. Torches are lit earlier. And you notice how the benches invite you to nestle deeper beneath pelts. Nobody frets about sleeping too much. The darkness is a cue, not an enemy. You and your neighbors simply let first sleep creep forward an hour, extend the hush between sleeps, and treat dawn's late arrival as permission for a second dream cycle. When you finally rise, the sun still hangs low, casting blue shadows across snowdrifts. Yet bodies feel limber, not lethargic, because the extra rest matches the extra cold your immune system must fight. The Vikings orchestrate winter nights with practical tweaks. Thick felted wool curtains descend over the smoke hole and the lone doorway, sealing out drafts and all but the faintest glow of moon off snow. Inside, flames stay banked lower than in summer. Too much heat would dry the air and leave throats raw. You help sprinkle moss along the hearth trench to slow combustion, trading bright firelight for longer burning embers that cast just enough red to guide midnight feet. The result is an almost cave-like dark that floods pineal glands with melatonin, stretching sleep into a restorative cocoon. Meals respond in kind. Dinner shifts earlier, heavy on stews rich with marrow and dried roots that slow release calories through hours of stillness. A brief dawn snack, dried bilberries, and warm whey bridges the gap to a later breakfast. Even conversation softens. Winter tales favor reflection over adventure, coaxing minds into deeper slumber rather than sparking adrenaline. When cabin fever threatens, children race outside at midday to sculpt snow dragons, burning off pent-up energy while pale sun gifts their skin a fleeting dose of vitamin D. Come dusk, weariness wraps them quick, and the longhouse sinks again into that hushed, communal dream pool. Then, just as bodies adapt to long dark, spring tilts the earth and light floods back. Daybreak arrives earlier than your eyes prefer, the air vibrating with meltwater streams. Yet the mindset you honed all winter trusting sleep's natural course makes this pivot graceful. You and your kin simply slide wake time forward, letting first sleep contract. Some nights, second sleep barely exists, replaced by a single, satisfyingly dense stretch. To block dawn's overeager beams, you hang a smaller curtain across the smoke hole, thick enough to dim first light, yet thin enough to ventilate. The strategy isn't about forcing 8 hours. It's about accepting that bodies need less full night's sleep when sun powers serotonin like a forge. Summer brings its own puzzle, the near midnight sun hovering just below the horizon, painting the sky in perpetual pastel. Vikings counter with layers first, the wool curtain, then a hide flap, finally dangling tufts of sheep fleece over any knothole that leaks gold. You craft a simple eye mask from soft lambskin, fastening it with a leather thong. Slip it on and darkness returns, intimate and immediate. Still, no one tries to mimic winter's longer sleep. Instead, they embrace seasonal biphasic rest, a shorter night segment. Then a midday nap under the boat shed's shade when the heat slows every hammer stroke. The nap is communal too. Oarsmen sprawl on coiled ropes. Farmers recline against hay bales, each surrendering to a brief lapse that tides them to dusk chores. Harvest season later compresses rest again, but compensation comes in rich REM density. Scientists will one day call this phenomenon sleep efficiency. Vikings just know that a tired body dives deep the instant lids close. You witness it after threshing barley till twilight lay down. Exhale, and dreams whisk you to fjords glazed in moonlight within heartbeats. Waking feels crisp, as though sleep itself distilled into potent drafts instead of prolonged cups. Moon cycles weave yet another layer. New moon nights are darker than pitch. Seasoned navigators schedule open sea launches then, counting on extra rest before dawn rowing. Conversely, waxing moons lend silvery glow perfect for mending nets outside. So, bedtime drifts later in those weeks. Instead of resenting the disruption, you welcome it each phase, a rhythm instrument overlaying the seasonal beat. When a full moon glow seeps past the curtain, you shrug, rise midway through second sleep, and join a quiet knot of neighbors offering thanks to Mani, the moon god, before gliding back under fur. The livestock mirror your pattern. In winter, they huddle indoors, ruminating slowly, their chewing syncopated with crackling logs. Come summer, they graze late under pastel skies, and you adjust milking times accordingly. This reciprocity reminds you circadian flexibility is not laziness, it's ecological harmony. By aligning chores to daylight and moonlight rather than stubborn schedules, you carve out pockets for rest that modern time clocks never forgive. Even your psyche benefits. Seasonal affective gloom finds little foothold because longer winter sleep shores neurotransmitter levels, while summer's added light showers you with serotonin. The cultural narrative reinforces this balance. Winter sagas teach endurance and introspection. Summer ballads celebrate risk and exploration. Each story fits the energy budget of its season, so your expectations of yourself remain realistic. On bleak January mornings, you don't berate sluggish thoughts. You share them over breakfast, trusting they'll quicken come May. Transport these lessons to contemporary life, and you start with light hygiene. In deep winter, mimic the longhouse by dimming LEDs after sunset, using amber bulbs, hanging blackout curtains, even scheduling work later if possible. Allow yourself 9 hours when nights stretch to 15. As days lengthen, let curtains admit dawn earlier. And don't panic. If sleep trims itself to 7 hours, your energy gauge will confirm adequacy. If summer's early glare wakes you too soon, an eye mask or smart blinds echo that wool curtain's mercy. Next, sync workouts and meals. Heavy evening exercise or late-night snacks in winter create metabolic static that clashes with longer sleeps. Shift them earlier and favor slow-burn stews. In bright months, feel free to grill fish later and take a post-meal stroll beneath twilight digestion and circadian clocks now tolerate the schedule. Embrace naps when heat spikes, without self-reproach. A 20-minute siesta can mirror Vikings' midday doze. Finally, track lunar phases not for mysticism, but practicality. On starless new moon nights, plan deeper rest, skip late shows, blackout devices. During full moons, expect lighter sleep. Channel that wakefulness into relaxing crafts rather than doom scrolling. In both cases, attitude completes the adaptation. Treat variability as biological jazz, not malfunction. Back at the fjord, autumn's first chill grazes your cheek, hinting at the next tilt of the planet. You smile, already picturing thicker furs, earlier stories, slower breath. Experience has taught you that no season owns a perfect sleep template. Excellence lies in moving with the sky's metronome, not against it. You tighten your cloak and head inside, confident that when darkness grows or shrinks, you'll meet it with the right blend of curtains, naps, and willing surrender, just as the Vikings always did, trusting the heavens to set the tempo while they perfected the art of keeping time. A sliver of autumn moon climbs higher as you and the crew beach the longship, muscles humming from the last haul of cod and timber. The air tastes crisp, almost metallic, and each exhale curls like drifting parchment. You know the drill by now: stow oars, rinse nets, then reach for the big birch bucket waiting by the cook shelter. Inside, cool spring water glints, infused with a hint of spearmint that someone folded between stones at noon. You tip the ladle, feeling liquid sluice down a throat dry from sea salt and wind. Hydration here is never an afterthought. It's a through line braided into every season and chore, as critical to Viking sleep as straw bedding or dark curtains. Throughout the day, you've already cycled through the hall's fluid trilogy: clear water at dawn, lightly soured whey with midday bread, and a copper cup of low-alcohol ale during the afternoon push. Each drink plays its part. Water flushes away metabolic ash from overnight repair. Whey, tangy and faintly effervescent, restocks electrolytes and dials stomach acid up just enough to greet lunch without the crash of mead. The ale, clocking in at barely 3%, delivers B vitamins, malt carbs, and gentle fizz that keeps conversation rolling while hands keep working. None of it is gulped in frantic batches. Instead, swallows are spaced like drumbeats across daylight, keeping blood volume steady, joints oiled, and kidneys unharried. The rhythm shifts as sunset deepens. You pour another half ladle of water. Feel it settle cool, but not sloshy. Tonight's stew is rich barley, carrot, and peppery turnip leaves, so you sip gradually, letting the broth supply most evening moisture. Vikings learned the hard way that flooding the gut a finger before bed invites midnight bladder calls that slice REM like a frayed rope. Worse still is heavy drink, strong ale, fermented honey wine taken late enough to let acetaldehyde steamroll delicate brain waves. Instead, the final cup before curfew is a finger of barely sparkling ale, more probiotic than intoxicant, and it comes at twilight, not torch time. You consider the many tales the Skald tells about sailors washed overboard after mead binges, or warriors too foggy from liquor to hold a shield wall. The moral land soundly moderation extends beyond wakefulness to sleep architecture. Low alcohol brew watered, gently soured supplies, tryptophan's cofactors without tipping GABA into blackout territory. The result is a central nervous system that winds down on schedule, slides into slow wave phases, and stays there until prolactin drifts you briefly awake. That brief wakefulness, so natural you barely register it, now reveals the beauty of smart hydration. You open your eyes in the hush between sleeps, aware of a mild thirst, but no bladder pang. A single sip from the clay cup by your straw pillow answers the dryness. 2 swallows would be overkill. The liquid is lukewarm water steeped with a shred of dried apple peel, just sweet enough to match the brain's sleepy palate. You place the cup back, roll to your other side, and dreams spool up again, like wool off a spinning distaff. Morning proves the plan. You rise without cotton mouth, head clear, joints supple. A heavier drinker would crawl toward water, nursing a skull thump and tattered REM. Instead, you're ready to shoulder nets before dawn blushes the horizon. While cresting dunes en route to the boats, you chew a few salt crystals kept in a pouch, another Viking trick to balance hydration once sweating starts. The modest sodium nudge keeps water from flushing minerals too fast, and it primes nerve cells for crisp firing during rowing sprints. Back on shore at midday, the cook hands out sour whey again, this time buoyed with a sprig of yarrow to settle any queasy stomachs. You sip slowly, noticing how the light lactic tang feels almost effervescent, massaging the gut rather than dousing it. Lactobacilli hitch a ride, ready to colonize intestines and keep the immune line strong as autumn nights grow sharper. Modern microbiologists would applaud. Vikings just nod, satisfied that spirits stay level and fists stay steady on axe handles. When celebration calls, perhaps after a successful barter or a wedding feast, the hall still honors timing. The stronger honey wine flows right after the midday meal, when the body has hours of daylight to burn off ethanol before shadows lengthen. By the time stories wind down and candles gutter, only a mellow glow lingers in the blood, too faint to sabotage REM, but warm enough to soften memories of winter storms yet to come. Linking these habits back to the seasonal dance you learned last night. You see, the genius fluid strategy flexes just as sleep length does. Winter's long dark demands thicker stews and a bit more whey to counter cabin dryness. Summer's ceaseless sun invites more water, cooled in shaded pots, and the tiniest splash of ale in early dusk to replace salt sweated out in the fields. Lunar phases sneak in, too, on brighter full moon evenings when bedtime drifts later. An extra ladle of whey reins in appetite, preventing late-night snacking that would otherwise trigger thirst bursts in early REM. None of this unfolds under scolding rules. It flows from observation. You watch how early settlers suffered cracked lips or morning fog and trace the culprit back to lopsided drinking. So you self-correct sip earlier, dilute heavier, cut stronger brews before bells ring night prayers. The hall supports the practice by placing water jugs at arm's reach and keeping stronger spirits locked behind oak staves until festival days. Even children internalize the cadence water when waking. Whey after chores. Ale only when the sun stands overhead. Carry the lesson into modern life, and the blueprint remains sturdy. Begin the day with a full glass of room-temperature water before caffeine commandeers your kidneys. Drip hydration across hours, one bottle within reach during work. Another during commute rather than shotgun bursts that spike bathroom sprints. Trade afternoon energy drinks for kefir or light kombucha. The tiny yeast fizz mimics that Viking ale without pounding the liver. As dinner approaches, taper fluids broth counts so by lights out. Your bladder rests instead of rehearses. If you crave a nightcap, cap the night earlier, a single ounce of diluted whiskey on the rocks at twilight, not a double pour at 11. Above all, abandon the modern machismo of crushing pints or hoarding coffee until eyelids jitter. Balance begets better sleep, and better sleep begets sharper movement. Softer mood. Clearer memory qualities every axe-wielding rower prized as much as any desk-bound coder should. You needn't ferment your own ale, though you might enjoy it. You only need to space sips. Mind volumes. Respect timing. And keep midnight drinks gentle. Back in the longhouse. Final chores taper. You tip the bucket. Empty the last pint of mint water onto dying embers, releasing a quick hiss and spearmint cloud. It's a scent the brain now tags as curfew. A vapor signal that work is finished and night will soon shoulder its share. You wipe hands on tunic, settle under fur, and feel fluid equilibrium cradle every cell. Heartbeat steadies, limbs grow deliciously heavy, and the knowledge that you won't bolt awake, parched or bursting, lets mind unclench its final grasp on wakefulness. The dark welcomes you, balanced and buoyant, to a sleep as smooth as a moonlit fjord. Proof that even water, when sipped with intention, can be a lullaby. Steam from the mint-kissed bucket still drifts above the embers when you realize the ritual you've spent months perfecting: darkness, temperature, posture, herbs, rhythm. Hydration has become something larger than the sum of its parts. It's no longer a checklist you dutifully follow. It's an ecosystem that follows you, wrapping each hour in cues that slide one seamlessly into the next. The Vikings never named it, but you can feel it breathing with you, a living architecture of rest that starts with the first sip of dawn water and ends only when tomorrow's water meets your lips again. Think back to daybreak, when you walked the shoreline and let icy spray sting your cheeks. That shock of cold, the low sun raking across waves, the slow draft of water from your clay cup. Those weren't isolated acts. They primed photoreceptors, skin thermoreceptors, and circulatory pumps in a cascading handshake that told every cell, morning is real. Build the engines. Hours later, as oars carved ripples and sweat salted your brow, subtle thirst tugged at nerves, reminding you to sip way before muscles cramped. Each swallow carried magnesium and sodium that would later coax synapses into clean signals. Even the low hum of crew chatter served a role, stimulating oxytocin so evening's descent into communal quiet would feel like a gentle dimmer instead of a slammed switch. Around midday, when sunlight slammed highest and nets weighed heaviest, the draft of weak ale threaded carbonation through a gut, busy digesting fish and coarse bread. The light alcohol nipped cortisol enough to blunt stress without dulling reflexes, while B vitamins rode malt sugars straight into mitochondria, starved by morning labor. As you worked, the clockwork inside you never lost track muscles, recorded microtears. Adenosine dripped into neural gaps, and lymph vessels ferried debris toward clearance tasks your body scheduled confidently because it trusted night would deliver the raw materials for repair. Dusk confirmed that trust. Broth replaced water, barley replaced sugar, stories replaced commands. The moment you tipped the last ladle of mint water onto embers, senses logged the hiss as a closing parenthesis day's dialogue over, night's prose beginning. No cortisol surge, no last-minute adrenaline, only a slow seep of parasympathetic tone that widened pupils to ember glow and narrowed thoughts to a single-purpose surrender. You crawled beneath fur, feeling like a sail furled tight against the mast work finished. Fabric ready for wind, but happy to rest in calm. Even the brief waking midway through the night fit the pattern. One sip of apple-steeped water, a shallow stretch, a glance at embers still shouldering mint scent, and you slipped back under like a river otter returning to a nest of reeds. Because hydration, temperature, and light never veered off script. Melatonin never crashed. Dreams resumed at the next sentence rather than starting a new chapter. Prolactin peaked, stitching immune armor. Growth hormone swept collagen across tendon edges fuzzed by rowing. By the time dawn thinned the roof thatch, every system had run its maintenance protocol. What astonishes you now is how effortlessly the cycle repeats. The longer you live inside it, the less willpower it demands. Sleep no longer feels like a problem to solve or a commodity to bank. It's a tide you have learned to surf, trusting the moon's pull, even when clouds hide the moon. Your modern mind, reared on productivity charts and sleep-tracking dashboards, finally recognizes what those rough-hewn beams have been teaching all along. Biology sings best when the chorus of cues light. Food, movement, companionship, story. Silence lands on the right beats. Miss enough notes and the tune turns to static. Catch them, even roughly, and the melody carries you without strain. Science would confirm each element. Blue light avoidance to spare melatonin. Split sleep patterns to enhance memory reconsolidation. Omega-3s and fermented whey to balance neurotransmitters. Communal safety to lower nighttime vigilance. Hydrotherapy to drop core temperature. Precise hydration to stabilize REM. But citing journals feels redundant in a room where every sigh and stretch testifies louder than any paper. You sense the data each dawn when joints open like well-oiled hinges and mind focuses before the first swallow of ale. Carry this ecosystem forward, and it travels surprisingly well. A blackout curtain in a city apartment becomes your turf roof. An LED set to 1-800. Kelvin stands in for embers. A warm bath salts muscles like a hot spring. Kefir sipped at lunch echoes sour whey. A weighted blanket and a partner's steady breathing mimic the longhouse bench. Even timing water matters front-loaded by day. Taper at dusk. 1 or 2 sips at midnight if thirst calls. Then sleep unbroken till sunrise. The exact props may change, but the cues stay true. Light gives way to shadow. Heat yields to cool. Work narrows to ritual. Voice softens to whisper. Sip fades to stillness. The real treasure, though, is psychological. By trading optimization for orchestration, you silence the inner taskmaster that scolds every restless minute. If you wake in the dark, curiosity replaces panic. Which tide is this? What cue did I miss? You adjust gently. Loosen a blanket. Sip. Breathe. Then let the cycle right itself. Instead of tallying deficits, you collect evidence of balance, clear eyes, steady humor, memory that doesn't scatter like sparrows. Productivity rises not because you chased it, but because a rested brain simply works better. You step outside, boots crunching frost that formed while you slept, and inhale air so clean it rings. Behind you, the longhouse exhales smoke in lazy ribbons, proof that embers lasted exactly long enough. Ahead, the fjord stretches pewter under barley sugar sky. You tighten cloak knots, swing a coil of rope over your shoulder, and start toward the boats. Muscles answer with quiet enthusiasm, lungs with measured draw, mind with crisp intent. The day will ask plenty a sail to mend, a trade to haggle, a child to teach knots, but the night has already paid the down payment in calm vigor. This, finally, is the Viking gift, not a single hack, but a living contract between daylight doing and nighttime undoing, renewed each 24 hours with nothing more lucrative than water, wheat, fire, and trust. Keep signing that contract whatever century, whatever latitude, and the profit shows up in every stride, every decision, every laugh that rolls easier off a tongue, unstuck by sleepless grit. You pour the first morning draft of water, feel it hit an eager stomach, and smile. Another cycle begins, inked in simple sips and silent stars, ready to write strength into bone and brightness into thought for one more brilliant, ordinary day. Thanks for sailing through this Viking night with me. We've learned how darkness, ember light, balanced meals, steady movement, smart hydration, and seasonal flow knit together the ultimate sleep cycle. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments which of these Norse habits you'll bring into your own bedtime ritual, and why. Reading your ideas helps the whole crew refine our modern rest. Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss another journey through time and sleep. Until the next story, dim those lights, sip something warm, and drift off. Good night, and may your dreams steer true tonight, friends.